myself, my name is Neeti, and I am the co-founder of the STEAM Foundation, who will be co-hosting the panel itself. Just a little intro on the STEAM Foundation. We are a youth-led organization that focuses on providing equal opportunities to students interested in the STEAM fields around the globe. And we mainly started this organization because we could see a clear educational inequality when it came to STEAM subjects, which is mainly why we chose to do it in the first place. And yeah, so we are really excited to see all of you today. And just a reminder to keep your mics on mute, and we really encourage you to keep your cameras on. And now I'm going to pass it over to Navia, who's going to tell you a little bit about her organization, who is co-hosting with us, and a little bit about herself as well. So you can take it away, Navia.
Hey everyone, I'm Navia. I'm president of the Ontario Youth Medical Society. I just wanted to start off by giving a quick intro to the organization and kind of what our mission is. So we're a team of youth consisting of high school and university students, and we really just want to solve problems and kind of make an impact. So one of the ways we're doing that is hosting events like the Premed panel today, because we know how confusing it is to be a high schooler or in university and have a lot of questions. So hopefully this is helpful to everyone here and everyone watching. We're also super excited to host this panel with one of our partners, the STEAM Foundation, and they've already introed themselves, but they're really amazing and we definitely couldn't have done this without them. From our team today, we have Ravina and Valerie, who are our directors of events, and we also have Valerie, who's our social media manager. So they'll be monitoring some of the event, and they were the ones who planned this event along with STEAM. So I lastly wanted to quickly end this just saying that a huge thank you to our panelists for being here. It really means a lot to us and everyone else here, and we're incredibly grateful for all your help.
Yeah, so thank you, Navia, for that introduction. And just so we are officially getting started, but we are going to start with our intros. So I'm basically going to start and say whichever panelist's name will go first, and then they'll basically do a 1 to 2 minute intro of themselves. And so, yeah. And so now we can have Will introduce himself.
Hey everyone, first thank you to the STEAM Foundation for having me here. I appreciate that. And thanks to everyone who came here to listen to our advice. So I'm a rising third-year medical student at Medical College of Georgia. I completed my undergrad in Kennesaw State University with a Bachelor's of Science in Biochemistry. And I've also launched a website. I don't know if any of you all have seen it, but it's called Premed Community. And it basically has advice, articles, and resources for pre-med students. So feel free to check that out. You can follow me on Instagram. My tag is MedStudentWill, and I'm more than happy to answer any of your all's questions if you have any. So.
Yeah, thank you so much. And now we can have Kabir introduce himself.
Hi everyone, my name is Kabir Walia. I'm currently going into my second year at Queen's University through the QArms program, or the Queen's Accelerated Route to Medical School. I'm currently 18 years old, and I finished high school at the Country Day School, which is a school in King City, Ontario. I'm a huge fan of singing. I've been singing ever since I was 6 years old, and it's one of my biggest passions along with medicine. Currently, I am unsure of what medical specialty I want to pursue in the future. It honestly changes based on the day, but I've kind of been honing in on the surgical disciplines, and I'm excited to begin medical school in one more year and join those interest groups and things like that so I can help narrow down my decision. And I'm really grateful to be here today, and I'm more than happy to provide any advice. If you have any other questions, even after the session, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram and LinkedIn. My messages are always open.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kabir. And now we can go ahead and have Maggie introduce herself.
Hi everyone, I'm Maggie. I'm from Ottawa. I just graduated from Colonel Biosecondary School. I just graduated from the IB program there. And so I'm going to be a first year at Johns Hopkins University in the fall. And I'm planning to study molecular and cellular biology on the pre-med track. So you can ask me anything about applying to the US and the IB program.
Thank you, Maggie. So now we're going to go ahead and have Mcat introduce herself.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on here. So yeah, my name is Mcat. I just recently graduated from UBCO with a Bachelor's of Science in Psychology and a minor in Bio. I'm currently studying for my Mcat and applying to medical schools here in Canada, and I've applied to a couple in Australia. So if you have any questions about that, you can ask me. Throughout university, I was the executive event planner for our pre-med club, so we ran some pretty cool events. So I am aware of what it's like to be a pre-med, so you can ask me about that kind of stuff too.
That's great. And lastly, we have Tiffany.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Tiffany. I just graduated from the University of California, Irvine, aka UCI here in California in the United States. I currently work as a research junior specialist in a nephrology lab. So if you have any questions about doing research after you graduate or how to get involved in research, you're more than free to ask me. During undergrad, I was a political science and a biological sciences double major, so that was fun. And on top of that, I did a lot of different extracurriculars, including volunteering at a free clinic and helping to alleviate homelessness in the local California area. After this, or whenever you feel like you need any questions or you have questions or you need advice, you're more than free to connect with me. I'm very active on Instagram. My handle is arguing for medicine, as well as it's the same handle at gmail.com if you have any questions. So yeah, happy to be here.
Okay, so we have 2 more panelists. We're gonna go ahead and go to Tyler.
Hey everyone, I just want to say thank you to both groups today for hosting this great event. I look forward to speaking and learning from the other panelists today. So my name's Tyler. I'm an undergraduate student at UBC Okanagan right now. I'll be entering my 4th year this coming fall semester with a major in biology. Right now I serve as the campus president for our pre-med club, so I've experienced setting up events and working with people in the community to spread awareness and information about how to pursue the pre-med path. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to me directly or through your platform today. Otherwise, I look forward to speaking and learning from everyone.
Yeah, thank you. And we're gonna try and go back to Ananya since our audio was cutting out before. So Ananya, you can go ahead and introduce yourself.
So I'll just start again. So like everyone said, my name is Ananya, and I just graduated from the University of Toronto here in Canada, and I did a double major in health and disease and psychology, as well as a minor in immunology, and I'm starting at the University of Alberta Medical School in fall. And yeah, so I'm really passionate about research and just women in STEM and, different ways to empower them. So I was the president of a club called Scientista, and where we work towards empowering women in STEM. And yeah, so right now I'm just exploring different specialties and just figuring out what I'm interested in. And yeah, so that's me. And of course, if anyone has any questions, they're more than feel free to reach out and ask me anything.
Thank you so much, Ananya. So I'm going to give it over to Valerie. She's going to be talking a little bit about the Q&A section.
All right, so at the end, in the last half hour, about between 4:30 and 5 p.m. EST, Niti and I will be hosting, I guess, a live Q&A session. So if you guys have any questions that pop up during the panel itself about specific people or programs or something, feel free to type them in the chat. However, they will not be answered until that last part. So yeah, I think Rohina will start with the prompted questions now.
All right, so I'm just gonna start off with a couple of general questions. Again, just feel free to add in whatever you want. So my first question is just very open. So what in your life sparked your interest in medicine, or when did you figure out that pre-med was the right choice for you?
Can you guys hear me? So I'm just gonna take the first question. So I think, as a cliche as it sounds, I think the first thing that interested me in medicine would be Grey's Anatomy. Like, I watched it, and that's what first caught my eye when I started thinking, maybe medicine is the field for me. But obviously, what they show on like TV shows and stuff is way different than real life. So I did a bunch of different shadowing experiences and really worked in like different hospital settings to really figure out whether this was the field for me. And that's when I kind of started to realize like, yeah, this is something that I was very interested in and I wanted to pursue.
Great, thank you so much. Mca, you can go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I guess for me, I was born in South Africa, so I spent a lot of time traveling around there with my parents when I was a kid, and there's a lot of orphanages out there and a lot of like very low income clinics. And so I think just being immersed in that environment really just ignited my passion for global health. And then obviously in high school, you take biology and all the science classes, and then I just gained a super big love for the human body and just the study of like how it all works. And then yeah, Grey's Anatomy too definitely sparked my passion for wanting to work in a hospital.
Amazing. Everyone loves Grey's Anatomy, I'm sure. So next is Kabir. You can go ahead.
Sure. I think there were several factors, but I think one of the main ones was my late grandfather suffered from a lot of heart disease, and throughout my childhood, he spent a lot of time in the hospital. And obviously, a lot of the time that I'd spend with him would be at the hospital. And I think for me, just seeing how those doctors were able to prolong his lifespan after he had several heart attacks, and seeing that power that they had in allowing him to live a longer and a fulfilling life really inspired me. He actually passed away the winter before I entered university. So I think he kind of played a very significant role in that. He himself was a doctor. And because both of my parents worked when I was younger, I'd spend a lot of time with my grandparents whenever I needed someone to look after me. So just hearing his stories and seeing what medical professionals were able to do to him really inspired me. And I think that's one of the main reasons why I chose to pursue this path of a career. So yeah.
Awesome. So next we're gonna move on to, just a second, Maggie.
Well, I'm only a first year undergrad, so my, career aspirations aren't as set in stone yet. But for me, I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to go into up until grade 10, when one of my friends had sort of like a health emergency, and I happened to be there, and I was the one to help him. And that moment sort of felt like a lot more meaningful than learning about business or any other fields that I had taken classes in. And I'm also really interested in biology, so those two kind of sparked my passion for medicine, and that's what led me to this.
That's amazing. So next we have Tiffany.
So just to kind of keep it brief, just because there's a lot of us. During undergrad, I was involved with the free clinic, and so my family kind of grew up in a kind of low socioeconomic area, and so we went through a lot of different adversities, and money was not easy to come by. So being at that clinic and seeing those patients who also struggle with those same adversities, I was inspired to go on and try to become a physician. And then beyond that, I just think for me, I found the calling just because I've always been looking for something to really help people. I think that's the common thing people say. And so when I was watching physicians and medical students work with patients, and when the patients would come back and their diagnoses would be great or better, that really inspired me to pursue this path.
All right, next we have Tyler.
Yeah, I'll keep mine brief as well, but medicine is something I've always been drawn to as far as I can remember, and growing up with grandparents who were in and out of the hospital as they aged, a special needs brother, there's been a lot of experience I've had being around doctors and seeing the impact they could have on not only a patient's life but their family and friends, and how it extends beyond the primary individual. So that's definitely been a reason why I want to pursue medicine and also make the similar impact onto other people.
Awesome. So lastly we have Will.
So for me, I'm someone who didn't always know I wanted to do medicine. It was something I kind of like realized later in life that I wanted to do. I was originally actually studying business in college, and then it took kind of an event where I saw someone important get sick, and I kind of realized that this is something that is more meaningful and impactful. So I guess that kind of drew it to me, is just that I wanted to make like a meaningful and impactful, like decision, I guess, with my career going forward. So that's kind of why I went down like the medical path.
Awesome, that's amazing. That's really great to hear, guys.
The next question, that we have for you, so Pooja will take that away.
Yeah. So the next question is, what is a typical day like for you, and how do you find the balance between your workload and healthy lifestyle? And Will, you could go ahead by going first.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. For me, at least right now, because I am preparing for my step 1 exam, my life is basically just study, eat, study, kind of repeat. To be fair, I mean, that's not exactly how med school is all the time, but it definitely is like for right now. Trying to find a balance, I mean, it is hard. I think just, try to find things that get you away from studying sometimes, things that can get your mind off of it. Like for me, I like to, exercise, and that kind of just gets my brain off of all the stuff I'm learning. So yeah, that's kind of like my typical day. It's not very exciting.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And then Tyler?
Yeah, so right now I'm actually prepping for the Mcat. I'll be taking it about 2 weeks from now. So, since December, my life has been consumed with Kaplan books and Khan Academy and stuff like that. But yeah, finding stuff to take me away from that. I love following sports, keeping in touch with friends. I think it's super important to have a life outside of medicine as well as one in, or else you'll experience burnout. You might begin to turn away from it. So it's super important that you have passions outside of medicine, and that's what I definitely try to keep as well as I pursue this. So
yeah, that's great. And then Maggie?
Right now is I'm just really relaxing before I start undergrad. So I'll just talk about a bit about how I balanced work and health. But just like the other panelists said, keeping a routine and a schedule to keep yourself accountable is really important for me, and definitely taking breaks instead of studying for a really long time at once, keeping in touch with friends and things like that really helped me keep my mental health and workload balanced.
Those are amazing answers. Really like that. So the next question that we have for you guys is, what is/was your favorite memory as a pre-med student? And I'll direct that question first to Ananya.
So I think probably my favorite memory would have to be when I got my first research position, and I was working in a hospital doing some clinical research, and I really got the opportunity to do rounds on patients, interact with them. And so there was this one patient who was close to my age, and he was in palliative care. And I think my favorite memory would just be interacting with him every day and just talking to him and trying to basically just share his worries a little bit, because he was all alone, and just getting that chance to maybe just make that time a little more comfortable for him.
That's really sweet. That's awesome. So the next person would be Tiffany.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, there's not too many great memories, just because the road to pre-med is kind of long and rough, and I think everyone, even going to medical school, can say the same thing. But for me, I think my favorite memory was the day that I had my first published paper. For me, my story into research was very long and arduous. I had a low GPA, so I had a difficult time getting into research. So having the day when the paper was published was a really eye-opening moment for me, just because I had been working on that paper for 3.5 years. So it kind of encompassed my entire journey, and it was great to end it on that note.
That's really nice to hear. The next person can we have is Kabir.
Sure. Well, my journey through the sort of my pre-med journey has kind of been relatively brief, I want to say. Most of it just because I'm going into my second year of university. I would say, though, throughout high school, one of my favorite memories would probably be getting involved with HOSA, HOSA Canada specifically, and working as a national officer there. I think we would organize the Spring Leadership Conference, and for me at least, getting to help run competitive events and getting to inspire fellow high school students for me was always something incredibly rewarding. But other than that, I'm sort of looking forward to the next few years. This year, obviously, things got cut a little bit short because of the pandemic. My appendix also ruptured, so that was also fun. But other than that, I think HOSA has definitely been a large sort of positive contributor and aspect within my pre-medical journey. So yeah.
That's awesome. Cool to hear. so I think that's great for this question. So the next question that we're going to go to is, what's one thing that you would change about your pre-med experience or your application process? So the first person I'm going to ask this question is Mcat.
I had a super untraditional pathway towards medicine, and I've kind of always seen it as like it hindered me in a way, but looking back now, I don't think I would really change anything. However, I do wish I reached out more and spoke to other students and gained a better insight about the pre-med path and the steps or things I could have done along the way to make it a little bit easier. I'm the oldest kid in my family, so I didn't have any footsteps to follow in. In all honesty, I wish there was stuff like this, like these panels and things like that, that I could come to help me figure out what works and what doesn't work. But for the most part, I don't think I'd change anything.
That's great to hear. Awesome. The next person can we hear from is Tiffany.
Yeah, just to emphasize what Mcat said, I think for me as well, I had a very non-traditional, I wasn't 100% sure I wanted to go into medicine. And I was also the first person in my family generation to even go to college and stuff. So I had no idea what I was getting myself into. So I think if I were to change one thing, I wish I would have reached out to professors earlier. Not all professors will be super nice, but you know, you kind of have that feeling when you walk into a class and you know you'll connect with that professor. I really wish I had capitalized on that earlier, because it wasn't until my senior year that I reached out, and those professors are still now like emailing me constantly throughout the pandemic. So yeah, I wish I would have reached out earlier.
Awesome, thank you for that. Next, I'd love to hear from Tyler.
Yeah, so kind of just to continue off of what Tiffany said, yeah, I wish I would have, started volunteering and being involved in my community a bit more earlier. That's something I'd say I mostly started in my second year of university. Prior to that, I was really focused on my grades and working on that aspect of, my future application, I suppose. But once I've started that, I made so many friends that, volunteering in the hospital where in the ER there where I volunteer, coaching football, it's very rewarding. Made so many good friends, have many, good memories from it and great experiences. So I wish I definitely would have started that earlier, not just for my application, but, to grow as an individual. And, it's been a great learning experience from that. So
awesome, thank you. And last, oh no, not last. Can we have Will next?
Yes, I mean, just kind of continuing off what they said, I kind of wish that I reached out a little bit earlier when I was a pre-med specifically to get my letters of recommendation. I didn't realize kind of like how long and complicated it would be, kind of like emailing the professors back and forth. So I would definitely recommend don't wait until like the last minute to do that, because that caused me a ton of stress. And probably my other advice would be to start preparing for the Mcat just a little bit before you might think that you do, and also to use UWorld. Definitely recommend UWorld.
Awesome, thank you so much. So we're going to direct the next question to Pooja.
Yeah, so the next question for the panel would be, what do you think is the social responsibility of a healthcare worker and why? And I'm going to go ahead and direct this first one to Ananya.
Okay, so I think that's a really important question, because healthcare workers are really at this privileged position of influencing so many people. So I think that they do have, the social responsibility to really advocate for people who are not able to do that for themselves. They also they do have a social contract with society, and so they are held to somewhat higher standards than a lot of other professions. So I think it is really important that healthcare workers are mindful of, their impact on others, the way they, conduct themselves on social media, their digital impact, the kind of things that they post. So I think being mindful of that, and yeah, so I think it's definitely really important for them to speak up on issues that they think are important, because they're able to reach people, and people really regard them as someone who has a lot of expertise in their field, and they're really looked up to. So
yeah, thank you so much for that. Could we have Mcat next?
Yeah, I just building off of everything you already said, I completely agree with that. Aside from the general duties of being a doctor, I think it's really important for anybody who works in the healthcare to be transparent with their patients, respectful of their concerns, even if they seem a little bit alternative. Even just understanding, when it comes to patients' history and their unique background. I think as well, I believe doctors are responsible for educating everybody and the patients. And for me personally, I would love to see more of like integrative medicine alongside preventative and collaborative care. So I think that as a doctor, it's just your responsibility to look at things from like a whole perspective too.
Yeah, that's great. And then can we have Kabir?
Sure. I think that in terms of the social responsibility of physicians, I think kind of, as it was mentioned before, they have a unique sort of role in society in the sense that while they're providing care, they also have to account for the many different social factors, including the social determinants of health that influence patients. I think doctors also have the responsibility to be advocates for their patients in all senses, and especially now more than ever, when societies are becoming more and more diverse, it's important that doctors have a critical and a true understanding of the demographics within the societies that they practice within, so that they can understand sort of where their patients are coming from, what cultural decisions might be influencing, what cultural differences might be influencing their lives, and also what barriers, whether they're socioeconomic barriers or barriers due to systemic racism, that might influence their health in general. I think it's super important for doctors to not only be knowledgeable in the scientific sense, but they should also be knowledgeable in terms of how societies are structured, and history in terms of how certain groups of people might have been oppressed, in addition to how society as a whole is made up, and sort of the diverse groups that make up that society. So yeah.
Yeah, those are some great points. How about Maggie?
I think the other panelists pretty much summed it up. Yeah, I think that doctors, from my high schooler perspective, I think doctors definitely have a big social responsibility, not just in a scientific way, but to also understand their patients, especially when there are healthcare disparities between certain groups like women or people of color. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And then Tyler?
Yeah, I mean, I think Kabir, really hit the nail on the head there with what he said about advocating. As a doctor, during the day, your role might consist of, helping people medically, but I think outside of that, which is super, super important, is in advocating to your friends and family and demonstrating, what healthy living looks like. Because ultimately, rather, what it comes down to is you're not just a doctor, you're held up to a standard that should be a person that models what healthy living should be, and helps to spread that in their community. And I think, that's a huge part of the social responsibility that, doctors should take up, in the role and outside of the role.
Yeah, thank you for that. And then Will?
Yeah, I think the other panelists, did a really good job of explaining this. I think it's just really important, as a doctor, to treat the patient not as a patient, but as a person, and to really just look at them in a holistic sense, and really, like the social determinants of health, all these things, play an impact in what happens to someone's health. So I think it's really important that doctors, and we have a responsibility to look out for those who can't really speak up for themselves, to look out for those who are underserved. And I think that that's like a very special privilege that you have by being part of this, the medical career. So.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I think I'll just give it to Rohina for now.
All right, so I'm just going to move on to the more application and technical based questions. So these are going to be tailored for specific questions, for specific panelists, and feel free to elaborate as much as you can. So my first question is to Maggie. And so can you describe the application process while you were applying to Johns Hopkins as a Canadian student? So you can just talk about the college application process in general. Yeah.
Sure. So I applied to both Canadian and American schools. I applied to Hopkins ED, early decision, which means that you finish your application earlier, and if they accept you, then you are bound to that school, so you have to go. And so I got into ED, so I didn't actually apply to any other American schools after I found out. I found that the application process to American schools is much more holistic than Canadian schools. So American schools, they ask for the SAT, your GPA, they look at the rigor of your courses, your extracurriculars, teacher recommendations. There are a lot more factors that go into your application than Canadian schools, which tend to focus much more on grades, and your essays for the American schools, which is also a huge part. For me, the process, I would say, started in grade 11 when I started researching the schools that I wanted to go to, and preparing for the SAT, which I took in May of junior year, and then I finalized my application towards the fall. And I think that for American schools, it's a lot more important to be well-rounded and sort of show your personality and who you are through your essays or extracurriculars. American schools, they really want to accept the student, not the grades or numbers on a page. So I think the most important thing for me was to try and showcase who I was and my passion for whatever major I chose. And so, yeah, in general, it is a lot more holistic than Canadian schools, which is something to keep in mind.
Thank you. That was really helpful. So my next question is, we can start off with Ananya and then Will can take it from there. Does a future pre-med really need physics or calculus to get into medical school? This is surprisingly a very popular question. So, yeah.
Okay, so in my personal experience, I didn't do physics in any of my undergrad courses. I did do calculus because it's a requirement for my degree. So first year I did two calculus courses. I don't think it's required, so to say, but I do think doing physics especially helps prepare you for the Mcat because it is a significant portion of the Mcat. And there are a lot of concepts that might be more difficult to understand if you haven't taken a proper physics course before. So for me, it was a little bit harder learning all the concepts by myself, but there are resources out there like Khan Academy or any of the prep books. They do go into quite detail about all the physics portion, like the topics that you need to know. Again, calculus, I wouldn't say it's necessary because the Mcat doesn't really have much math. I think the most math that would be there would probably be, adding stuff up or simple multiplication. Yeah, so I wouldn't say it's necessary, but doing physics especially helps you with the Mcat.
Yeah, so at least for me, for most of the schools I applied to, physics was a requirement for them. Calculus was a requirement for, I think, just a few of them. The school that I got accepted to, calculus was required. So I'd say, like, when it comes to like knowing the requirements and stuff, just like check the schools that you're going to apply to, and make sure that you hit all of those while you're still a pre-med. And as she said, physics is important on the MCAT. So taking it, prior to taking the MCAT would be helpful. And when it comes to actually being in med school, how much this stuff applies, there's actually some like overlap, like the principles of physics and stuff kind of come into play a little bit, like the respiratory system and stuff. So it's nice to have a background, although I can understand why most people don't see the value of learning physics if they want to be a doctor, but there is like some like overlap.
Okay, great. Thank you. Those are really awesome answers. The next question that we have is directed to Kabir. So we want to ask you, what are the pros and cons of accelerated programs, and what made you stand out in terms of your application process?
So that's a great question. I'll start with the pros in terms of what I think is great about an accelerated program. I think firstly, for students that already have their mindset on medicine at a young age, it's a great opportunity for them to get into the medical field, obviously at a faster rate. And I think another big factor that's often talked a lot within our program is students now, because they don't have to focus on things like the MCAT and the traditional medical school process, there's a lot more time to focus on other things that also help contribute to being a great doctor. For example, within my program, we do a lot of humanitarian work. So we start to really hone in what it means to be sort of a doctor, not only as a physician in the practicing sense, but also as a person and how to interact with people, how to care for people. Also, just in terms of, I think it's really great to be able to focus on your hobbies and things like that so that you don't burn out eventually. It also provides the room to do those kind of things and make time for things that you might otherwise not have the time for. Also, I think that with not just with an accelerated program, but with a tight-knit program like QArms itself, having only 9 other students in the program with you kind of during your QRM sessions is really helpful. It kind of builds almost like a family dynamic and a really great support system, which I think is kind of unparalleled in some other programs, just in the sense that you're able to kind of be each other's support systems if you ever need anything, and you're always there for one another. So that's really great. I think then if we flip onto the con side, I think obviously it is a early on commitment in the sense that if you aren't ready for medicine, it might not be the best option, just because after that it's a limited program, so you're obviously taking away a spot from someone else that might want it, and also it's directly out of high school. And I think with everyone, everyone kind of grows and everyone learns kind of what they want to do in the future at different rates. Some people sooner than others, and it's completely normal. So I think that for people that haven't made up their decisions yet, it might not be the best option, but nonetheless, I think there are so many pros out of an accelerated program as well. So, and then to address the last part of the question, I think in terms of what I think might have made me stand out in terms of the application process, I think when I look at medicine, I like to consider sort of all of the aspects that make up a doctor, kind of like what I've talked about before. I have one of the things that my grandfather would actually talk about during his time as a physician, or when he would speak about this, was physicians have to not only treat the disease but the person, and that's something that really stuck with me. And I'm a big people person, but at the same time I love science, and also kind of some people find it surprising, but I think that my passion for music also helped me stand out, in the sense that some people might find it strange, but I think that there are a lot of similarities between a musical performance and treating a patient, in the sense that you have to practice this performance, you have to connect with your audience, you have to relate to your audience, and sometimes you change things stylistically to sort of match the needs of your audience. So I think it was able, my passion for music was able to give me a unique perspective in the application process, which gave me a lot to speak about, and a novel perspective once again. So I hope that answers the question well. So.
Awesome, thank you. That was really informative. So I'll pass the next question on to Pooja.
It's actually me, but no worries. I can go ahead. So this question is for Mcat, and then we can move on to Tiffany. So what are some benefits of a gap year, and why did you choose to take a gap year?
Yeah, okay. So I had a gap year after high school. When I graduated, before I went into university, I chose to travel and I needed to work to afford to go to university. So I definitely had to take a year off to do that. Then within my science degree, which is normally a 4-year program, I took 5 years to complete it because, again, I had to work through my university degree to afford to go to school. So doing the pre-med plan, there's obviously a lot of things you have to do. There's volunteer work, extracurriculars. For myself, it was working as well, and then a full course load of science classes. So if you also don't have the opportunity to not work, taking a gap year offers you a chance to write your Mcat, which is what I'm doing right now, or getting in volunteer or extracurricular activities that you need to do. So it does put you behind a little bit. I also got married in my gap year, so that's a very unique situation. So definitely do what works best for your life. There's a lot of like social aspects too, and family obligations that came along the way. So you definitely just have to like plan for your future, and there's nothing wrong with taking a gap year if that works best for you. Just definitely don't try to do it all at once, because you'll really stress yourself out.
Yeah, I think just to add on to that, so I kind of come from a similar background. I had to work mostly to put myself through school, so I'm going to be taking 2 gap years, just partially to work right now because I am living at home due to the pandemic, but I'm taking classes to help raise my GPA, and classes after undergraduate are really expensive, so I need a way to pay for those. In addition, I just think it's a time just to relax a little bit. I think when we're going through the pre-med route, we're all like, go, 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 then it's Mcat, then it's volunteering, research, and then it's graduation, and you're like, where'd the time go? So I think having that gap year just to relax, to travel, or to work, or boost, improve your application in whatever way that you think you're lacking is really valuable. And because like for me, I know a lot of friends who are choosing this year, they weren't intending to take a gap year, but they're choosing to take this year as a gap year just because of the pandemic. Just gap years, I want to put it out there that gap years are not bad. A lot of people don't take them, and that's great. But for those of us who do, most of us say that the gap year was really beneficial. So don't shy away from taking a gap year if you have to take one.
So the next question is directed towards Tyler, but you guys can jump in whenever you want. So the question is, does it matter which degree a pre-med has? For instance, a lot of people did ask about a nursing, engineering, and biomedical engineering degree, and how could they choose a major?
Yeah, so I guess for the first part of your question, you know, when I applied to UBC, this was something that I really considered. And after attending some medical sessions with the campus medical school here, you know, UBC specifically, they had told us that you can apply with any degree, whatever you want. You know, as long as you filled the requirements for the Mcat and you had your basic Englishes, you were set. So I can speak to that. I can't really speak outside of BC. I'm sure that there's other universities in Canada that have similar setups for their programs and how you can pursue medicine for their campuses that they have. But yeah, I'd say I would definitely, you know, that's something that you'd have to look into for your specific location, you know, university of interest.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. So the next question is directed towards Ananya and Will. So the question is, what is the pre-med application process like for Canadian and American applicants? What are the differences, and what do you think was the most difficult aspect of applying to medical school programs? Ananya, could you go first, since you're probably more likely to represent the Canada side of it?
Okay, so yeah, so I only applied to schools in Canada, so I'm just going to speak to that, and then I guess Will can speak about the US. So in Canada, I applied to 6 schools, 4 of which were in Ontario, and the remaining 2 were in Alberta. And so the process for Ontario is that they have a common application portal, kind of like the AMCAS in the States, where you apply to all the schools together, and then they have a bunch of common questions that you have to fill in. You have to really detail all your extracurricular experiences. And for Alberta, it was slightly different. Each school had a separate application. And so I decided on those schools based on whether I had all the prereq courses, whether I met the cutoffs for the Mcat, because they have specific cutoffs for in province versus out of province. So for reference, I'm from Ontario, and when I applied to Alberta, I was an out of province student. So there were certain cutoffs that I had to meet to be eligible for file review. And so yeah, so I think the most difficult part of doing this was really consolidating all my experiences and trying to portray them in a way that really brought out the best in me as an applicant and really, you know, represented what I learned from these experiences. So, and there's also a very tight character limit for each one. So I had to keep, you know, editing it and re-editing it to make sure that, you know, it really included everything that I wanted it to include. And yeah, so I think something that would really help pre-med students as they go along would be to keep, you know, some sort of note or maybe a document on your computer where you really note down every extracurricular experience you did, really describe it, maybe talk about what you learned as you go along the way, because when you're backtracking and filling in applications, it can kind of be hard to think of specific examples or what you really learned from it. So it would be really helpful for pre-meds to really keep a track of all of these things as they go along.
So I can speak about the American side of things. I think that the point you made about like keeping track of like all of your important experiences is like a really good one. For me, when I was applying through MCAS, they'll ask you like all types of like important experiences that you had and things that made you want to be a doctor and stuff. And if you don't write these things down, you can kind of forget things that could be really like nice to put on there. So that's definitely like a really good piece of advice. So when it comes to like the process of applying in America, it's similar to what you said. Like you'll send out like the AMCAS, and then if the school likes you, like they'll send back like a secondary application, and then you fill out like their application. And then after you fill out their application, if they like you, they'll send you an invitation to like interview with them. And then after you do your interview, if they still like you, then you can get accepted. So that's kind of the process. It's a very long process, a very stressful one too. And so some of my advice when it comes to doing the applications, I'd say choosing the medical schools that you pick is really important. For me, I was just like, I just want to get in anywhere really. So like I applied out of state, I applied all over the country. Obviously I applied in state, but one thing just to keep in mind, it'll save you lots of money, is that if you apply out of state, they often want to know like why you're applying there specifically. And it's like, if you don't have a good reason for like why you want to apply to like this other state, you pretty much just wasted your money getting a secondary application for them. So I'd say like only apply to places that you know, like you have a really good reason, like maybe like one of your family members used to like, you know, graduated from that medical school or something. So that's just like a lesson I learned, I guess, like the hard way. But applying like in-state, like that's always like, you know, a very good method. So
thank you so much for that. So the next question is the start of our advice section. So the first question for this section, do you have any studying tips for working more efficiently? And I guess we're going to direct this one to Mcat.
Okay, efficiency in undergrad. It took me a long time to learn how to study. So don't feel bad if that happens to you too. I think to be a good student, or like the things you can do to prepare, is to like pre-download lectures and pre-read for your classes. That kind of stuff will make life a lot easier. For classes that require tons of memorization, like psychology, I know I use Quizlet like there was no tomorrow. I think for a lot of the classes, maybe there are harder things that you struggle with, tutoring groups. I know for my campus, there was free tutoring for like, I'm really bad at math and physics, so I definitely sought that out. Also, reaching out to your professor, they're probably the most intimidating people ever, but they're also the nicest and they can help you with literally everything. And then yeah, if you want to be better with writing papers or anything like that, or even with like applications, going to like the English department and stuff like that, there's always TAs and students who are willing to like help you and help you read over stuff. So definitely just like look at what your university offers and try and use all those resources.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And then Tiffany?
Yeah, so just like Mcat, I struggled to figure out how to study at first in undergrad, just because balancing work and studying or whatever you're doing at the same time is difficult. I think the main technique that I use is something called active recall, and there are a ton of YouTube videos about it. It's basically just this idea is that once you learn something, that you put a word down like on a piece of paper or something, and if you can describe to yourself everything about that word, then you understand the concept. And I think that was really beneficial for me, particularly because I'm not too great of a test taker, and so active recall is definitely something that I used now to do very well in my classes. And on top of that, I just think organization. I use Google Calendar a lot, so I have one calendar per class, and I put down the deadlines for every single assignment in bold red so that I know when something's coming up. Just simple things like that, because as a pre-med or as a medical student, you'll be balancing a lot of different stuff, so organization is really key.
And then could we have Will answer it finally?
Yeah, I think the active recall, that's definitely a very helpful thing. I'd say it's really important to find out what works for you. I know it sounds cliche, but like everyone has something that works different. Something that I feel like is really helpful specifically for classes that have like lots of like vocabulary, lots of things kind of like biology or like genetics or something, where it's like a lot of terms, like just like overwhelming amount of like information. Definitely using things like Anki, which is like a flashcard app, like most med students use this. That's been very helpful for me, just like the spaced repetition. I feel like spaced repetition is like really important. Going over the material multiple times, because you'll never like get the material like from the first time. Like for me, it takes like 3 or 4 times of like going through the material to like actually like have it kind of stick in my head. If I just see it once, like it doesn't stick in my head. So I got to go over and over it again. And when it comes to just like studying in general, I feel it's like really important to just like have kind of like a routine, like a habit. Like it's something like you just feel comfortable doing. So like if you feel comfortable studying in like the library, like, you know, then go to the library, and like you want to hold yourself accountable for it. You know, so I think that's just a really big thing, is like, you know, kind of get your routine and like build the habit. And the biggest thing I feel like for studying is just, it's like consistency. It's, if you go too fast and too hard, you'll burn yourself out. But if you can like maintain like a pace, it's like the slow and steady kind of like wins the race in this. So I just feel like if that makes any sense, I guess.
All right, that's some pretty good answers. So my next question, we can start with Maggie, move on to Kabir, and then Tyler can answer as well. What are some extracurriculars for high school students hoping to have a head start? And would you recommend focusing solely on medical extracurriculars or doing other activities that aren't directly related as well?
I can speak for me personally. I did research my grade 11 summer at McMaster, and I also did a lot of things that I was just interested in, like sports. I was an exec for Relay for Life at my school. I think that the most important thing is doing what you love, because schools will be able to tell whether you have a passion for what you do. If you just try and pad your resume with things that you don't really care about, then you can't write convincing essays about it. You can't talk to them during interviews about who you are and why you do like what you do. So definitely, if you want to do all medicine related activities because that's what you're interested in, that's what you love, then go for it. But if you are also interested in other things, like for me, Relay for Life isn't technically related to medicine, but I was just really passionate about it. Go for the things that you think will add to that you are passionate about, that will make you happy, and schools will be able to tell.
Can we have Kabir actually answer next that question?
For sure. So I think personally, based on my experience, I think it's really important to have a balance of extracurriculars involving sort of health science and also at the same time doing what you love. I think in terms of either pre-medical or health science related extracurriculars, HOSA is a really great opportunity. Also, SHAD, just in general for STEAM pathways and entrepreneurship, is really great and can help you kind of narrow down your interests as well. It was one of the reasons or one of the ways that helped me narrow things down before my grade 12 year just even more. And then also, I think it was mentioned before, but doing what you love is super important for any application process. And again, if you're just filling your resume with things that you don't genuinely have an interest in, they'll see through that in the application stage and in the interview process. Also, doing what you love will help you build character, and will also help you sort of discover who you are as a person, which will help you write stronger essays. It will help you relate to people in the future, and it's just good all around. So make sure that you're maintaining a balance of what you love, whether or not that's within medicine or outside of medicine.
Is it okay if I add to that? Yeah, I totally agree with what you all are saying. I feel like medical schools are not like looking for like a cookie cutter type of like applicant. So like, don't feel like the pressure that you have to like be like fit into the specific mold necessarily. I feel like they really want to make sure that like you're a well-rounded person. I mean, obviously, they care about GPA and Mcat, but like ultimately they want to make sure like, will this person be like a good doctor? And by having like, genuine interests and stuff that you're passionate about, I feel like that's a great way to show medical schools that like you're a real person, and I feel like they definitely value that. So I just keep that in mind.
Yeah, so leading off of that, from the admissions people I've talked to at the medical school on my campus, that's something they've stressed huge, is finding things in the community or sports or anything like that you love to do and sticking with it, because they look for commitment as when they're accepting people from or when they're accepting students rather from medical school. It's a huge commitment. So they want to be able to see if you can maintain a commitment for over a long period of time and if that can translate to medical school. For high school, I would definitely recommend doing activities or joining clubs or sports teams that are out of your comfort zone. High school is a great opportunity to learn and develop as an individual. And I think that if you put yourself out of your comfort zone, you're going to learn from people that you wouldn't have otherwise. You're going to develop skills that you wouldn't have otherwise. You're going to get exposure to different things that might pique your interest in new areas that you wouldn't have otherwise. So, obviously, yeah, do things that you love. It's super important to stay committed. I love football, so I played football all through high school. But definitely, join a club that, you want to learn more about or stuff like that. And the last thing I'll say too is get friends to join with you too. It's so much more fun when you have people that already there, and it's easier to join and get into as well. It's a great opportunity to learn, make new friends rather, but yeah, join with, make it fun for yourself, I should say.
Can I actually really quickly add something? So as a high school student, no one actually touched on this, but on your medical school application, at least for the US, you it is not normally recommended that you put high school activities. So don't necessarily think in high school you have to do something medical related. I know for Maggie, because she goes to Johns Hopkins, and for Kabir, because he goes to the accelerated program, that's a little bit of a different story, specifically because Johns Hopkins is a strong pre-med community. But for the rest of the universities out there that may not necessarily have such a strong pre-med community, you don't necessarily have to do like hospital volunteering or research during high school, because I didn't do any of that. And I know plenty of friends who also didn't do that and got into medical school.
If it's okay, I just want to quickly add on that too. For me in high school, like, because I didn't know I wanted to go into medicine until after high school. So I, like, in high school, like, I was like a B and C student. Like, I was not like an A student or anything. And I didn't do like any of those extracurriculars or anything like that. And, you know, that didn't like necessarily like hurt me because you can make up for it in like undergrad. So I wouldn't like let like anything that happened in high school like hold you back. Like you can 100% like make it into medical school, like no matter like kind of like how you did in high school, I feel like. So
awesome, that's really great. Those are amazing answers. So the next question we're gonna ask, I'm gonna direct that to Tiffany and Ananya. So what is some of the research that you've done or are currently doing at the moment, and how did you seek out those opportunities in terms of networking, and who did you do that networking with?
I guess I'll just start. So for me, I actually did 2 different research during college. I did medical research at the medical school on campus, which in chronic kidney disease. And then I also did political science research we're actually researching President Trump right now, so that's really interesting. But how did I get started? I have this whole long story on my Instagram about it. I was a low GPA student, and so basically I reached out to 25 different professors through cold email, and I didn't get any responses. And so I just kept on being persistent. I sent more emails. I showed up at their lab. Some of them got irritated, some of them didn't. And so ultimately I found my way to the lab that I'm at now and where I work. And so, you know, I handle everything. I'm now the most senior manager there. I work with the animals. We do studies on rats. I help train other undergraduates. So yeah, I just think the main thing is being persistent. As for my political science research, I actually just reached out to a professor I really liked, and I just expressed that I really enjoyed his class and if there's any openings there. And he just said, yeah, come on aboard. So I joined 25 other research members in that lab, and you know, we're just doing research. So yeah, I think mainly if you have an interest in something, reach out. And then also in the pre-med side of it, just be very persistent, because I know research is very competitive for pre-meds, and especially if you're a low GPA candidate, like I was, putting yourself out there and putting your best foot forward and showing that little bit of effort really counts.
Okay, so I think just what Tiffany said, definitely it's very competitive, and you do have to send out a lot of applications, and sometimes you don't get any responses or you get rejections, and it can be a little bit you know, discouraging, but just, you know, keeping at it and keep applying. So for me personally, I started, my first research experience was in second year of undergrad, and prior to that I had sent out more than 100 emails to different professors and different researchers. I think something that, as I went along and kept applying, something that really helped me was tailoring my email to each specific you know, professor and their area of research, because that's a lot better than just a cold email that doesn't have any reason for why you're interested in their specific field. So really having a general email outline, but also tailoring it to each professor, and also really narrowing down on what I was interested in personally and what my experiences were well suited for. That really helped me. So the first research I did was some clinical research in infectious diseases, and then the second experience I had was in a wet lab where I was doing more bench research on medulloblastoma. So we worked on mice models. So my second experience was a little bit easier to get, and the position was a little easier to obtain just because I had prior experience and I really knew what I was looking for. So definitely I think the main takeaway I would say is just to be really persistent, to keep applying, to identify what you're interested in, and you know, what skills you have that would be useful for that particular position.
Awesome. So the next question is directed towards Kabir, and then Maggie can contribute as well. So what can we do to replace current extracurriculars that have closed due to the pandemic? And also just for all the attendees out there, our organization, Ontario Youth Medical Society, is currently looking for content creators. So if any of you just want to add some skills to your resume during this pandemic, feel free to apply. So yeah, it's kind of a little bit of promo, but Kabir can go ahead first and then followed by Maggie.
For sure. I think a lot of organizations have switched to online work. I think there are a few Instagram pages out there. I don't know them off the top of my head, but I can share them later that compile a list of current online programs available for students. I think also just looking forward in time and seeing how things might be running next school year in terms of how the pandemic is. I think a lot of the school-oriented extracurriculars, at least for high schoolers like DECA and HOSA, probably won't be taking place. But I think this opens up more possibilities to join not so much like quote unquote extracurriculars, but working at organizations kind of like this they'll probably will be opening up application spots, things like that. I think getting volunteer positions at organizations, youth-run organizations, things like that, definitely have a lot of potential during a time like this. And I find that with a lot of those organizations, the majority of the work is done online. And also, I think you two can also take one of the things that they're having us do in QArms right now is kind of investigating our community and how it's changed due to the pandemic. And I think a lot of the work, you can kind of make your own sort of extracurricular or whatever you want to call it that kind of works within your community. Start an initiative, something like that. It doesn't have to be conventional, especially given that it's an unpredictable and highly unconventional time right now. So I think the pandemic is both a blessing and a curse in the sense that it's closed a lot of doors, but at the same time, it gives you a lot of opportunities to do things that you might not have considered previously. So that would be my advice in this regard. So.
Yeah, just to add on to that, whenever I scroll through LinkedIn, I see a lot of people posting about opportunities that they're offering or how they want to help out students who are looking for internships. So you can go on LinkedIn and try to find that and just let them know you're interested, and that might help. But yeah, everything else Kabir pretty much covered.
Okay, awesome, guys. Thank you so much for the tips. So the next topic that we're going to talk about is difficulties within pre-med, within medical school. So some of the topics that we are going to broach are a bit sensitive. So if you guys don't want to answer them, absolutely feel free to. This is open for discussion. So the first question that we have, we're going to direct it to Kabir and Mcat. So would you say that the pre-med track is very challenging? If so, how did you cope with all the stress?
I would say that it can be very draining at times. And I think for that reason, it's super important to keep in touch with yourself and your mental health throughout the whole process, no matter whether you're in high school or starting university, throughout university, things like that. Actually, this first year, I found at the very beginning, it was very easy for me to just kind of make time for everyone else, but not make enough time for myself. And that really can end up hurting you down the way. So I think it's always important to stay mindful of your own needs and your own concerns, making sure that you are kind of doing well, both physically and mentally in terms of your health is super important. Also maintaining your support systems, whether that's family or friends. I'm very much a family oriented person. So luckily, because Queens is in Ontario and I live in Southern Ontario, a few times each semester I'd make sure to come home so that I could keep in touch with my family, and also scheduling things like FaceTime calls, that always works. Also making time for what I loved when I was in the middle of schoolwork, whether that was booking a practice room all by myself so that I could go sing for an hour just to kind of de-stress. It's so important that not only you socialize and connect with other people, but also reconnect with yourself and kind of maintain a balance between those two things so that you can be your best self, and with that you can go and connect with other people and show them your best self. So.
Yeah, challenging. So yeah, everybody handles stress so differently. for myself, it was really challenging because I struggle with math and physics. And so I had to spend time retaking those classes because I failed them in university. So because of that, and actually any sort of failure or rejection, it takes a toll on your mind. I also had to work quite a bit throughout my school semesters and tried to fit in as many extracurriculars. So time management was a bit stressful. My biggest advice would be to find something that makes you so happy outside of school and can relax you and fulfill you, so that when you do have all those stressful things and, you know, midterm season or exam season comes up, you don't lose yourself in all of that, that you do take the time to like ask yourself if you're doing okay, and even like making your family and friends aware of your situation and telling them, hey, like I have final exams coming up, I'm having a hard time, like can you help me with this, this, and this, like, you know, just reaching out. I think that's super beneficial.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that answer. So again, this question is open to anyone. So if anyone has any little anecdote or anything that they would like to share, that'd be really great.
I'll just go ahead and add something. So for those of you following on Instagram, and if you're not, that's okay. I posted something about like today was the first day that I got an A in a science class in college a year ago. So the pre-med track is definitely challenging, and much like Mcat, I failed a bunch of classes because I just really didn't know how to study. And so I think to cope with that, I think my best advice would be to really kind of take a step back and figure out why you're failing the way you are, or like if you're just too overwhelmed by certain stuff. Because I talked to a lot of different people, and you know, the journey into medicine is so long, and like one setback, one failure, even 1 year is really not going to hurt you that much in the scheme of life. So like really don't be too hard on yourself. Yes, it's competitive, but you know, just take the time to take a step back, figure out what's going on, and then when you get back on the path and you start to succeed, it's just so fulfilling. So yeah.
Awesome, great. Thank you so much for that question. For that answer. So the next question is going to be asked by Pooja.
Yeah, so again, this next question is open to anyone who is comfortable to answer it. So this question is, if any of you guys are comfortable with like sharing if you've experienced any issues with mental health. Examples could be like burnout, demotivation, or imposter syndrome, etc.
I recently touched on this on an Instagram post. I have a Canadian pre-med page, and I made a big post about imposter syndrome because I feel that it's just so relevant. So if anyone doesn't know what it is, imposter syndrome is when you feel mentally that you're a fraud and you have these feelings or internalized fear and doubt that you're not who you say you are. I have experienced this quite a bit on my pre-med, especially when it came to speaking to doctors, admissions advisors, or literally anyone who was an important position in my life. I always felt that because I wasn't a 4.0 student, or that thing, I didn't succeed in everything, that I wasn't very special and like didn't deserve their time to talk to. So if you know that you're working hard and you are very passionate about what you're doing and you're real with yourself, do not ever feel like you aren't meant for what you are trying to achieve. Also, don't let anyone on social media or people at your school make you feel that you aren't worthy of achieving your goals just because you're doing things a little bit differently. I definitely felt imposter syndrome in university, and I definitely got quite a bit of anxiety, especially around final exam seasons, or my last semester I had to take 6 classes one semester, and like that was just too much. So check in with yourself for sure, because university, especially the pre-med path, can be a lot sometimes.
I guess I can add a bit about the burnout side of things. So I'm as I mentioned before, I'm actually prepping for the Mcat right now, and I took a bit of a more extreme route, I suppose, to preparing for it, and I started reviewing content back in December. But one of the things that, you know, like, as you'll see, I'm sure anyone who's written the Mcat can tell you, is that you will experience burnout. Just the feeling of being demotivated, you know, not wanting to study, feeling like, you know, what you're doing is really taking over your life. And I think it's super important, if you feel this too, and especially, you know, outside of the Mcat and university, is just to take a couple days off, talk to your friends, you know, go for a walk, do stuff outside, get some distance between yourself and the content that you're prepping for is super important. It's just as important as preparing for the test itself, because you really need to be in a good mental space to write these exams and to do well. So definitely, you know, like, reach out to people and take your breaks as needed, because, you know, in the long run of it, you know, taking like 1 or 2 days off isn't going to be what determines if you get like a 528 or a 500 on the Mcat. So
if I can just make a comment on the burnout subject, For me, I've definitely had some burnout experiences in medical school, and some also as a pre-med student. It's really hard because like when you start to feel burnout, you start to feel lack of motivation, you start to question why you're doing this, and everything becomes so much harder. So you might think that you're doing the right thing by pushing yourself and trying to constantly go, trying to constantly grind to get a better application. But once you start getting into that area of like burnout, you're doing yourself more harm than you're doing good. And for me, my grades started going down when I was starting to experience a lot of burnout, and it really took like kind of like taking a step back and like kind of a little bit of self-care, I guess, to really like get myself back on the right track. And then once I started to take care of myself, my grades also started to go up. So I mean, you really have to see your own health, your own well-being as an investment to your future, an investment to your good grades. Like you being healthy, you being mentally healthy is you doing well as pre-med or as a med student or whatever. So it's so important. Definitely take care of your health. Definitely find a way to get out of the studying. If you're feeling overwhelmed, then you need to just take time for yourself, because in the long run, it's definitely for the better if you do that.
All right, thank you so much. Your answers were really, really insightful. So this is our last panelist question. And again, anyone can just unmute and just give in their input. So have you ever experienced any negative effects of biases such as sexism, racism, being a person of color, struggles with low income, or being a first generation student throughout your pre-med or med experience? And how did you deal with it? And if you did not, how do you think being in the medical community, all of us can kind of just come together to eradicate these issues? So yeah, again, this question is open to anyone.
I would say, like, based on my experience, I've only gone to Queens for 1 year, but I want to say, just as a person of color, Queens sometimes, and they're doing work on it now, doesn't have the best reputation in terms of being super diverse in that sense. With that being said, while I never faced severe racism, there often are a lot of microaggressions. And I think, just for anyone out there that might face this in the future, it's really important to stand up for yourself where needed, to reach out to friends, to keep connections open to people who you can relate to. And I think often it was very easy for me to sometimes just try to forget or try to ignore my Indian heritage specifically, but that would do more harm than helping. And I think just embracing your culture, even when you're faced with adversity, can help get yourself through that. Reaching out to people is always helpful, and especially when people need to be held accountable, there are always resources at the university to make that possible. So yeah, that would be sort of my experience, at least, with often facing prejudice as a person of color at Queens.
Well, I was just going to say, I think a lot of the things that were mentioned in this question, a lot of them actually contribute a lot of times to either having low opportunities or like having a lower GPA. And so kind of to go off of what Emka was saying, it actually contributes a lot to having imposter syndrome. I talk with my friends about this all the time. I think a lot of us have some form of imposter syndrome just walking into any type of space. Regardless what your nationality is, regardless what your religion is, I mean, it's so common. I mean, so I think the best thing I've learned to try to combat that is like have a good, strong support system, whether that's in person or through social media. I'll just tell you guys all this, that if you take advantage right now during this time, like I've reached out to a ton of doctors through social media, and they are more than inspiring, more than willing to help. And it gives you that boost of confidence, especially when you see someone who may have been like you, who has a low GPA, or from your heritage, your religion, or even if not, like if you're just a student who doesn't abide by these labels, but you've struggled and you struggle to figure out where do you fit in with all of this, reaching out across social media or in person is very helpful. So I really encourage everyone to do that.
Just to add, one thing, the great thing about medicine, and I've seen this, through my undergrad and in high school, is that really it's not limited to a certain type of person. It doesn't matter what sex, race, color you are. Anyone can go in. You could have any type of background you have. So I would just say, if you experience any of this, just biases or discrimination, You know, it's super important that while you understand what they're saying, you have to really brush it aside and, you know, understand, you know, I'm pursuing something that's meaningful, and something that I want to do. And it shouldn't matter, you know, what other people say about me or who I am. And, you know, especially, you know, with this too, as a pre-med, you know, it's tough. You're always going to have obstacles in the way of yourself, and in the way of your path. So I think it's super important that you develop some, you know, in a sense, thick skin, and really, you know, strive to become a stronger person in a sense, to really, you know, tell these people, you know, like, it doesn't matter what you say, it's what I want to do with my life and what kind of impact I want to have on others. So
awesome. So with that being said, our prompted questions are complete. It is 4:30, so we'll now begin the live Q&A session. So we've kind of curated one of some of the most interesting questions to us that we've seen throughout this Q&A. But just continue going with the chat if you have any more questions. Okay, so the first question, I will be hosting this with Niti, so Niti, you can go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. So once again, this is open to any of the panelists. You guys can just unmute yourselves and ask. So this is for anyone who can answer. Do you believe that doing the full IB diploma program is worth it or an advantage when it comes to applying to university? Also, what IB classes do you take? And another side to this question is it worth to take AB classes? And one attendee asked specifically if you guys know any Canadian undergrads that accept AB courses. So any of the panelists can go ahead and answer.
Sorry, I was just going to speak about IB classes. So I did do IB in high school, and I found that it really helps in terms of the content is very similar to your first year courses. So it does provide a very strong background, especially for pre-med courses like bio and chem, and math as well. So it really helped me that I'd already done these things before for IB. So it helped me get higher grades in my first year courses. I also think because IB has a lot of lab components where you have to write your own research papers, and even the extended essay, which is a 4,000 word essay that you write, it really gets you into it gives you exposure to writing, and that really helps throughout undergrad because you have so many assignments, so many lab reports to write. So I definitely think that doing the IB is very helpful. You don't have to do it, but it does provide you with a little bit of an advantage when you're doing your undergrad courses. I didn't do AP, so I'm just gonna let Maggie take over.
I also didn't do AP, but I can speak on IB. In my experience, just in a nutshell, if you're applying to the US, then applying to schools that care about it, then taking higher level classes like IB and AP classes does matter because they want to see that you're taking the highest rigor possible at your school. So, you know, if it's available to you, but you choose not to, then the schools you're applying to might question why you didn't want to challenge yourself with those higher level courses. So personally, because I applied to the US, I did want to take the IB program. For Canadian universities, they don't really look at whether you're taking IB or even like if it's SL or HL in IB, they only look at the actual number grade that you get. So if you feel like you're going to do better just in a normal program and you only want to apply to Canadian schools, then it might be in your best interest to drop out of IB or not take it altogether. But IB also is really good for learning a lot of different subjects, like taking ITGS for me. I never would have taken it if I wasn't in IB, but it was actually really interesting. And developing study habits is a big one for sure that you get out of from the IB program. And of course, like Ananya said, the EE, your IAs that you have to write, those give you a lot of experience that will help in university later. So it's really up to you and your future goals, whether or not you want to take IB or not. Or AP.
Do we have anyone who's going to speak about AP, because that's really great? And Tiffany, yeah.
Yeah, I was actually just about to talk about APs. I actually took 9 APs in high school, and so I actually want to tell people that if you, I actually would not recommend taking AP classes. I'd actually recommend you take community college courses or something called dual enrollment that's offered at a lot of different high schools. Just because for me, I passed all my APs with 4s and 5s, and none of those credits were applied to my degree. So it's also very dependent on where you go to school. But I think the safest bet, honestly, is to take community college courses or dual enrollment courses, just because those credits are guaranteed to apply to your degree. Especially because like for me, I paid for all of my AP courses and the exams, like they're $85, $90 each. And so I wish I had known that back in high school, so I could have saved some money. So yeah, they're important in terms of when you apply to schools, because I applied to a lot of different schools, and like, you know, how prestigious a school is, they do look at AP courses, but just keep in mind that dual enrollment or community college courses actually are ranked at the same level as AP courses, so you can do both or just one option and you'll be totally fine.
Awesome. Okay, so now moving on to the next question, also just open for anybody that can answer. So the question is, do you have any advice for acquiring good recommendation letters from teachers? What are some good ways to connect with them?
I'll go ahead and start on this one. As I said before, I feel like getting letters of recommendation is something that like we kind of like push off to like, you know, the back of our head. Like we got Mcat, we got GPA, we got like all these things, and like letters of rec is like, oh yeah, I'll get to letters of rec. But then when it's time to actually get letters of rec, then it's like, oh wow, I have to get like 4 or 5 letters of rec, and it suddenly becomes like a really scary process. So definitely one thing is like I would start like looking at it as soon as I can. Like if you see like a professor that you get along with well, then like start building that connection with them, you know, and build that, you know, build a relationship with them, and then they can potentially write you a letter of recommendation. And it doesn't just have to be professors. You know, for me, one of my best letters of recommendation came from the doctor that I shadowed. I just developed like, you know, a good relationship with him, and we spent a lot of time together. So he was able to write like a really solid recommendation letter for me. So I'd say like, you know, like when it comes to letters of rec, just, you know, diversify a little bit. For me, I had one from a doctor. I had one from like a manager at the place where I tutored at. And then the other ones came from like research professors and then like classroom professors. So it's like you can get them from like all types of different people, but it's just, I think it's really important to like start sooner than later when it comes to this. I think that'll save you like a lot of hassle.
I can add on to that too. I just recently applied to medical school, so I had to get them all together. And just don't leave it to the last minute if you are in that position. I think oftentimes we forget that, you know, the professors have a life and they've got a lot going on. Also, if you want a really good reference letter, they generally take quite a bit of time to put together, especially if they're catered for you. So when I reached out to my professors, I reached out 4 months in advance, and still for some of them with COVID and everything going on, they didn't come until like the last week. So just make sure that you're not doing it before a deadline and you give them a ton of time to write it. Also, I know it probably seems really hard to get reference letters when you're in a university class that has like 100 and something kids in the class. For myself, that was a big issue, that in most of my classes, there was like 100 to 200 of us, and you don't really get to develop a relationship. So I would definitely pick like professors where you have a smaller class size and you have the opportunity to actually go and talk to them. A really good way to do that is their office hours, to go and see them afterwards. Even if you think you're asking them like the silliest question ever, you don't want to just be a number. You want them to know your name, so that when you do go and ask for one, they can remember emails and about chatting with you, so they know a little bit more about your personality. And also to add, I didn't just get them from professors. I also developed relationships with people in the community, which is really important. You can reach out to doctors, people who you volunteered for. You can even like past managers, anything like that. That looks really good for reference letters as well.
If I could just add back onto that. Yeah, it is definitely really hard to like get a letter of recommendation from like a teacher when there's so many students in there. I think when it comes to that, like asking questions during class, showing that you're like proactive, always being there on time, you know, these things, like the professors will notice it. Like if they notice like you're someone who's like sitting on your phone during class, like you can forget like getting a recommendation letter from them. So I just say like first you want to like obviously leave a really good impression with them. So like if you know it's like, oh, this is like a professor that I'm interested in actually like getting a letter of recommendation from, then like, you know, you just want to make sure that like they see that you're very, you know, serious, you're very like you're taking this very seriously. And another thing that's really important is like many of the panelists have said already, is to show persistence. So going to their office hours, and like if they see the consistency, it's like, oh well, this, you know, this person keeps on coming to visit me and they always ask me for help on like homework or whatever, that will definitely help you like stick out in that professor's head. So I'd say like the key is just like being persistent, and you know, until like they really know who you are.
Yeah, I think that's great, just to like really know what it takes to maintain a good relationship with someone, whether it's a professor or somebody else. If any of the panelists want to answer any of the questions in the chat, feel free to just respond to them in the chat. That's totally fine too. And one other question is basically, when is the right time to take the MCAT?
I'll actually start with this really quickly. It depends what you want to do. So for, at least for the US, if you want to go straight, AKA you don't have a gap year, you should start preparing, from what I've heard, this summer before your third year, because you would apply at the end of your third year to go straight. That's if you want to go like the traditional route, the straight path. For the rest of us who might take a gap year or who struggle a little bit more with classes, it really depends. Like for me personally, I didn't start studying for the MCAT until May of this year, because I don't plan on applying till this coming May, just so that I have time and I'm not like, again, I'm not burning myself out, and and the pandemic, who knows what might happen, so I want to give myself some buffer in case something happens like that. So yeah, just I think for what I understand, most people study between 3 and 6 months for their MCAT. So just kind of work that into your schedule. See, it really depends when you want to apply to medical school, I think, is the main thing. See when you want to apply for medical school and then kind of backtrack. It's the same thing with letters of recommendation and with your MCAT and whatever else you're doing. Just work backwards from there and give yourself an extra month of room just in case some random pandemic hits and you have to adjust a little bit.
I can add to this too. I have written the MCAT before and I am writing it again, which happens. So don't stress if that happens to you. The first time I wrote it was after my second year of university, after you take like the majority of the prerequisites. If you want to do this, you can. I took it in the summertime before school started again. I will add though that it is a big time crunch. You only have about 4 months before school starts again. You have to be really comfortable with the material, and the MCAT itself is a huge hurdle of just like learning how to do the MCAT itself, not even just the material. So I would definitely say like summertime is a good time, but then at the same time, remember that you're sacrificing your summer to the library essentially. And now I'm writing my MCAT and I'm writing it after in my gap year, and I'm taking a lot longer to write it again. And because of COVID, I know a lot of medical schools have changed the deadlines for when they're looking for the MCAT. So if you are keen on writing it this year, you do still have time. I know that for UBC Medical School, they've changed the deadline to the end of December, which it used to be the end of August. And that's why a lot of students did like cram to get it done in the summertime. So if you want to still study, I know that there is still time for this year. But yeah, just pick what works best for you.
So I think there isn't one absolute best time to do it. I know a lot of people do it at the end of the second year or at the end of the third year. I plan to do it out during my the summer of my second year, but I was working full-time at a lab and I just did not end up having enough time to study. And so I decided to do it in my third year summer, and that I was also working 40 hours a week then, but I think I really learned from the first time trying to do it, where I really set aside time, made a super detailed schedule on how to study, and just setting short-term goals. And I think it's really important not to get affected by what everyone else is doing and when everyone else is doing it. It's really about what works for you when you're in the right headspace, when you're able to, dedicate enough time to do it. And ultimately, if you do it once, twice, how many ever times, it's just what's best for you and what works out with your schedule.
I can just add on to that. If I had one piece of advice for people that are looking for a time specifically when to take the MCAT, more specifically for students, like for science students and undergrads in taking a bachelor's of science, I would definitely recommend taking all of the courses that are covered on the MCAT before you go and attempt it. Just because, one course specifically that I'm thinking of is biochem, which is a huge portion of one of the sections on the exam. I can't imagine myself writing the exam without have taken the class last year. There's more space and breathing room to make a mistake on a midterm in a class than there is on an MCAT for biochem and subjects like that. So I definitely recommend using resources on campus like the class and the professors that are there to when you take the class, so you can get your questions answered then. And then when it comes to taking the MCAT, it's just review. I feel like that process would be a lot easier than having to learn it and teach it to yourself the first time. So.
I can also add, for anyone out there who's not a science student or going into, like a bachelor's of science or biology or anything like that, I for myself was, but a lot of my friends, they were in human kinetics or kinesiology or even business, and they chose to write the MCAT. So it is very possible for you to write the MCAT if you haven't taken those prerequisites. Obviously for myself, and I would recommend you should take the classes, but I know personally some of my best friends, they wrote the MCAT based off learning the material just from the MCAT books. I wouldn't recommend it. I still think it's important to like go and actually learn all the material because you will need to know it for medical school. But if you don't have the time to, you can't fit it into your school schedule, it is possible to write the MCAT without having to be a science major.
Awesome. So the next question that was asked was, did or do any of you have a backup plan in case you do not get into medical school? What type of things would you want to pursue if it couldn't be medicine?
I'll start this one off. I talk about this actually on my Instagram. I actually switched out of my science major right at the end of my third year because I honestly thought that I was never going to be pre-med. I was never going to make it. And so my backup plan was law school because I happen to be really good at the political science law side. But I just want to put that if you know that medicine is for you, and I think I speak for a lot of the friends I've spoken to, like you will do anything to get into med school. Like you will wait a year, you will study for the MCAT, you will take it again. Because really for a lot of us who go into medical school, like medicine is our calling. So once medicine becomes that thing where you're like, I cannot live without it, I cannot think of doing anything but it, you will do absolutely anything to get in. So yeah, that's my little story. I thought about law school and then I had a revolutionary summer and I was like, nope, medicine is the only thing for me. So there's no backup plan at this point.
Yeah, just to kind of add to that too, if medicine is something you really want to do, put 100% of your time and effort into it. I heard stories of students who applied for 8 cycles of medical school before they got accepted, which is 8 years. So, if you want to do it, you'll eventually get there if you put the time and the work in and the effort. So that's not a question. It's just if you are going to put the time and effort in, you got to stay consistent with it and really keep pushing and not give up. And yeah, I feel like if you have a backup plan, you're already in a sense admitting defeat, but that's just me. Medicine's something I've always wanted to do. So yeah, you'll get in eventually if you keep trying.
I feel the exact same way. As you all said, like for me, it was like, I'm going to get in or I'm just going to keep trying until I get in. I feel like you need to have this mindset, honestly, because the people who are getting in also have that mindset. So it's like you really just want to like do anything it takes. If you don't even get in this cycle, you can always apply next cycle. It's like, okay, why didn't I get in this cycle? Let me go ahead and fix the things on my application that could have hindered my success, and then apply next cycle with the new things added to your application, and you will eventually get in. Like I have a classmate who is who just turned 40 and she got into medical school. So I mean, like it's possible. Like if you really want it, you can make it happen. So it's just a matter of like how much you want it, and if you want it enough, you'll definitely be able to get in.
I can add on that too. I agree with that everybody else said. It's definitely like if that's what you choose, that's for you and that's your dream, and you should do everything in your power to get there. Life happens, and along the way, like if you have to work and stuff like that, it doesn't necessarily have to be a backup plan, but you can pick something in your field that doesn't require a lot of study that you can do in the meantime while you still try and get into medical school. For myself, I did a certificate in laboratory assistant, so I get to work in a lab and I get to draw people's blood and work with patients, and so it just like being in that environment inspires me every single day to keep pushing towards medicine. And I don't necessarily see it as a backup plan. I don't think I could see myself doing it for the rest of my life. It's definitely a stepping stone. Like it's just one more step I have to take towards going into medicine. So don't ever think that it's like the end for you if it's taking a long time.
Yeah, those are all really great answers. So thank you guys so much for the insightful advice. So our next question is from someone asking, is grade 12 or really your last year in undergrad too late to do certain things you're passionate about like research or extracurriculars?
I definitely don't think that grade 12 is too late, especially since you're still in high school. That's a long way off from applying to medical schools. And there are tons, most American universities, like they don't really care about like how late you started. Really, they care more about like how passionate you are about something. Like for me, I know I was worried about starting too late because I had no idea I wanted to go into medicine until the end of grade 10. So I was worried about it, but I still looked for like research and things like that, and tried to educate myself on what it was like to go into medicine. And I just tried to show my passion and who I was in my applications. And I think, the universities don't care that in grade 9 and 10 I didn't have that experience. So definitely go for it in grade 12 for sure.
Yeah, for me, as I mentioned before, I was like a B and C student in high school because I didn't know what I wanted to do at the time. So it definitely doesn't really matter that much. I think like what it does matter towards is like what undergrad you can get into. But ultimately, what you do in undergrad is what like the medical schools care about the most. And just showing that like you're a well-rounded person and just doing everything, not just grades and stuff. Like definitely medical schools care about that. I wouldn't worry about what you did in grade 12. Like I didn't realize I want to do medicine until I was like 20 or 21. So like, I'm definitely like a few years behind my classmates, and that didn't stop me.
All right. So the next question was a two-part question, so we just took the second part. So if you're a successful undergrad student, but once you get into medical school, you begin struggling with the content, what happens next? Are there many academic programs there to help bring your grades up, or will you potentially be on the verge of being kicked out?
Okay, I'll just go ahead and speak about that. So at least at my medical school, and I think every medical school is a little bit different. So if you struggle with the content once like you get there, they have like ways to remediate courses. So for my school, let's say that like you fail like the biochemistry module in year 1. At the end of the year, they offer you the chance to like remediate the course. And then if you fail like two main sections of the curriculum, they'll have you like do the whole entire year over again. So it's I think every school is a little bit different. I know some schools like you can get kicked out for like not doing well, but I think that kind of depends on the school. At least at my school though, like there is like they don't want to kick you out. Like once they get you in, like you're probably gonna make it through. Like it's just a matter of time, I guess. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. I'd worry more about just getting in, because once you get in, they want to keep you.
Yeah, that's great. So another question is more about scholarships and financial aid. So basically, how can you receive scholarships, and what's the best way to look for them?
I know for myself, I would recommend talking to your bank. They usually have a lot of scholarships that are available, either through them directly or through people that are working with them. So I would strongly recommend that, as well as looking into your own university. See if they have anything available and that you can apply to, as well as there's different organizations you can volunteer for in big companies like that you can even part-time work like an actual job that have scholarships available for students. So it's just a matter of looking into it and seeing what's out there and what's applicable to you.
I think you can also, like when I was going from high school into university looking for scholarships, there's usually websites for every province. I don't know about America, but like you usually just type in like British Columbia and then university entrance scholarships or anything like that. And I can't remember the name of it, but there is a website and it lists tons on there. So basically you just go through the requirements, see if you meet them, and then just start applying to them. It is kind of hard. You are competing against a lot of other students, so really try and make yourself stand out. Usually if it's big companies and things like that are giving you the money, which in my case it was, they just really want to see that you're involved with your community. So I'm from a small town, so community involvement was huge. So and that's something you can do to volunteer for medical school as well in grade 12. It doesn't have to be medically related. You can just volunteer within your community, and it says a lot about you as a person doing any sort of leadership roles or just like really helping out. That will help you get bursaries and scholarships for university.
Awesome. Okay, so and with that, we're gonna finish like the formal part of the Q&A, but we just wanted to ask one last question, which is, what is one last piece of advice you have for the attendees? And anybody can answer.
I'll go ahead and start. I'll buy everyone else a little time to think. The main takeaway I think I would tell anyone trying to go into medicine is don't be afraid to fail. There are going to be so many times you're going to fail. And I think on social media, a lot of times people only put their successes, but just know that behind one success, there's probably like 25 fails. And so really, like if you're struggling, or if you're not, you're struggling to figure out if you want to go into medicine, or you're struggling with a class, like it's okay, like you will get through this. So yeah, and then keep on pushing yourself to keep on growing.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to that. Like I consider myself to have, like I got into my dream school and everything, but during high school, like there were moments like before like a test, I would just cry for like 5 minutes and then go right back to studying. Or like, and I keep this journal and you can see like what happened like a few years ago on that day. And the day that I got into Johns Hopkins, I looked at the year before, and exactly a year ago, I had been crying about a chem test that I got back on that day. So really, during high school, there were a lot of up and downs for me, and I still ended up getting into the school that I wanted to, and being happy with how everything turned out. So it's totally okay to feel like you're failing or being really stressed out during the process. It's totally normal.
If I had a piece of advice that I could give to anyone here, it would be that you should do your best to surround yourself with people who are going to make you better and that you can learn from. Older years, especially, if you can find like a mentor to look up to and work from and be inspired from, that's huge. You don't want to be with a group of people that, in a sense, like the adage, like don't be the smartest in the room. You want to be with people who can bring yourself up to a new level and you can learn from and gain experience from. So that would be my piece of advice.
I think something that I would say is important to keep in mind is that if medicine is something that you really want to do and that's your end goal, I think it's really important not to compare yourself to people around you, and also to just keep in mind that there are some things that you're going to have to sacrifice on, like sometimes, going for the summer or like going for parties as much as some of your other friends. So just it's really important to remember what your goal is. And how important it is to you, because that kind of helps you when you might not be able to go out as much as your other friends because you have to study for the Mcat, or if you're working. So just keeping in mind what's important to you and your priorities, so that you're not always comparing yourself to others.
I feel like for my advice, I guess I would say is like, the main thing is like, staying persistent and really remembering why that you want to do this. There's many times where you don't get the grade that you want and you feel discouraged and you think, can I do this? And you have the imposter syndrome. But just know that that's part of the process. We all deal with that. I've dealt with that. I know my classmates have dealt with that. So don't let that discourage you. Always keep in your mind like why you're doing this, and always like feel the passion inside of you, and like let that be what like drives you to keep on. Don't let the little road bumps, like get in your way. Just keep on pushing through and you'll be there definitely before you realize it.
To build off of what Will said, medicine is so much more than just writing tests. I think that if you're getting overwhelmed in your school semester and you're having a really hard time with your classes, get up and step away from the books and go do something that's meaningful to you, that reminds you why you want to do medicine. For myself, it's walking into a care home and just having a chat with people who don't have any family, volunteering in your community, helping out with people on the street, with homeless people. There's so much you can do in your community, you don't even realize it. And stuff like that really helped me during tough school semesters where I was like, can I even do this? Like, am I even meant for this? That kind of stuff is huge. So just remember, it's not just about your grades, but it's about who you are as a person.
I would say it's super important that whenever you are sort of planning your goals, and whether it is getting into medical school or your dream undergrad program, it's super important to make sure that you remember that progress is never linear, and that there will be ups and downs. But if you stay persistent and you keep the goal within your mind, you can make it through. I found that throughout high school, at least, there were several obstacles, at least, that would often make me feel hopeless. And it was very easy to just kind of turn a shoulder to my goals. And looking back at it now, I'm happy that I pushed through those times of adversity, because in the end, you'll see that if you keep a persistent mindset and you stay true to who you are and you act with integrity, you will get to where you want to be. So my biggest piece of advice is to recognize that progress has its ups and downs. It looks more like this than it does like this. So just appreciate the process, trust the process, and have faith in what you believe in, and you'll get to where you want to be.
Yeah, I think all of you really gave great responses. So thank you to everyone for asking questions. We just want to apologize to all the attendees whose questions were not answered due to the time limit of the Q&A session in the panel itself. Rohina is actually sending the Instagram handles of all of our panelists in the chat down below. So please check them out if you have any further questions or questions that are more individualized to a certain panelist. Along with that, we will be sending out a female feedback form on your email so we can just know how this event went for you and just learn some constructive criticism. So please fill out this form so that both our organizations can learn a little bit more about hosting panels. A really big thank you to all of our wonderful panelists today. They gave some really insightful advice for both people in high school and undergrad. I know that I will personally take this advice into my pre-med journey, so thank you guys so much. We're so grateful that you chose to come and talk with us today. So once again, thank you to Ananya, Mca, Kabir, Maggie, Tiffany, Tyler, and Will. And another big thank you to all of our attendees for coming onto this panel. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to DM any of the organizations, so the Ontario Youth Medical Society or the STEAM Foundation. This will be recorded and we will be giving you the recording very soon. So just give us some time with that. And so yeah, thank you so much for coming and have a wonderful